Welcome to the 34th Annual Saltwater Sportsman National Seminar Series presented by Bass Pro Shops and Mako Boats. The key to getting the most out of the seminar series is to listen to the small things, the subtle adjustments our faculty teams adhere to when the fishing might be tough or they're trying to target trophy game fish. That's what we call the gold nuggets of the seminar series. So come with me, let's get right to it and join, in progress, the Saltwater Sportsman National Seminar Series.
Coming to you from the IGFA in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, it's the 34th Annual Saltwater Sportsman National Seminar Series, brought to you by Bass Pro Shops and Mako Boats. Now, here's George Poveromo.
Welcome back to another episode of the Saltwater Sportsman National Seminar Series, presented by Bass Pro Shops and Mako Boats. This could be a very intriguing panel. It deals with king mackerel fishing, how to get the most strikes, and to also target some of the larger fish. And we're going to talk about one technique that's pretty much unorthodox when it comes to catching big kings. But first, a very distinguished panel. All the way out of Key West, the one, the only, Captain Mark Schmidt. Right next to him, the living legend himself with over 50 years of charter fishing experience out of South Florida, the one, the only, Captain Bouncer Smith. And out of the North Carolina area, a top touring king mackerel tournament pro, bottom fishing extraordinaire, and electronics guru, that is Captain David Wicker. So, Dave, you're representative of how king mackerel fishing has really evolved to the tournament sense, where everyone's using very tiny hooks, super light leaders, anything to get the bites to score the fish. You're very experienced in this. Locating kings, what's giving you a shortcut?
Well, two of the major things is really looking for water temps, where the water temps are real close together. The plankton fronts, which is pretty much the same as the chlorophyll, the upwelling, that's where you're going to have a tendency to have more bait and see more big fish.
I'm going to throw out here too, and you two could jump in at any one point in time, is in addition to what Dave was saying, structure is very, very crucial. It could be rock piles if you're fishing in the Gulf. It could be wrecks. It's anything that has the ability to harbor bait and game fish within the range of a king mackerel and depth zone is going to have king mackerel. And Mark, I'm going to start off with you. What are you looking for if we wanted to get together and try to catch a king over 30, 35 pounds?
Well, first off, you mentioned it, rock piles and things like that, especially for us on the Gulf side. There's certain wrecks that always, or you have a pretty good shot. But I'm going to tell you one of the big things with the lower keys in Key West, yellowtails. Those kingfish hang around those schools of yellowtail. So if you have no history whatsoever, you don't know where anything is, but you do know that where they've been catching yellowtail, that's where I would start to looking for kingfish.
And I was sort of hoping you weren't going to let that one out of the bag, but that's been one of the big secrets for us in South Florida, Bahamas, and Bouncer is going to one up this. I could see it.
No, that's really interesting. In the Keys, it's yellowtails, but especially from Miami up to Fort Pierce, it's where the Spanish mackerel are at, because the big kings zero in on feeding on those Spanish mackerel. And I've experienced that all the way back to the 70s in Islamorada when we were catching Spanish mackerel like crazy in Hawks Channel, and we had 50 and 60 pound kingfish eating our mackerel while we were fighting them. It was.
And to your point too, those big kings will chase these Spanish mackerel right off the beach in 6, 7, 8, 10 feet of water too.
A really big kingfish is habitat is predominantly up on the shelf in relatively shallow water. Now, in South Florida, whether you're down in the Keys or Miami or wherever you are, the drop-off is really quick. So you go 2 miles out in Miami or maybe 5 miles in the Keys, and you've got water that drops from 30, 40 feet down to 90 or 120 feet. So that's the main spot that people look for school kings. But when you're targeting the big ones, they're usually up on that shelf.
Dave, let's go back, because I know that you guys in the Carolinas, you love a lot of times running beaches and finding these schools of bait.
We just have a tendency to find the bigger fish, like Bouncer said, closer to the beach, usually, just within a mile of the beach. But there's a lot, up our way, is a lot of menhaden, and that's the main the main thing we're looking for as far as bait goes.
All right, and before I move on to something else, when you have all these schools of menhaden and different ones, what's going to tell you maybe this one's going to hold a big king versus another one? Is the way the menhaden act, or is what's the rhyme or reason here?
Well, it depends on the bottom. We got some areas that's a real sandy bottom, seems to hold smaller fish, and we've got an area that's, we call it a shell bottom, it's a hard bottom, and that's, for some reason, seems to hold the bigger fish.
Very, very good. One thing that I want to point out is Simrad has the CMAP Reveal, which is a high-definition bathymetric chart. When you see this, this is just like getting a Google Earth, but of the actual ocean floor itself. And if you're looking for any kind of structure, relief, or whatever, and the coverage is within your zones, you could see the ledges, the depressions and all, which help you get up to where we're going to anchor.
Now, I was kind of hoping you wouldn't reveal that.
I know. Everything's changing,
I'm
Mark.
telling you what, that is one of the greatest features that they have, that they've come out with. It's amazing what it shows.
Excuse me, but that's exactly the attitude you had about GPS when it came out. It was gonna ruin you, and now you've been ruined again.
I'll tell you, it's great.
Well,
it's
let's
a great
talk about
feature.
this, because I'm going to jump on what Mark said. Some of the biggest kings that I have taken have been in the Bahamas or the Keys. Is we'll go yellowtail snapper fishing first. We'll anchor up, we'll chum heavily, let the tails come up, and even though we might be going for king mackerel, we'll take a break, let's have fun, put some dinner in the boat, get a legal size yellowtail, and you send that rig out. If there's any big kings around, it's going to happen very, very fast on that. So, but we're going to get into some of the really nitty-gritty here. When we come back, we have to sell some sponsors' products first. So we'll be right back with the Saltwater Sportsman Seminar Series on king mackerel after this break.
The Saltwater Sportsman National Seminar Series is brought to you by Simrad. Go with Simrad and go with confidence. Penn, let the battle begin. Sirius XM Marine, weather, fish mapping, and entertainment for anglers. Mercury Outboards, go boldly. Angle, portable fridge freezers, and high-performance coolers. George will be right back. Welcome back to the 34th Annual Saltwater Sportsman National Seminar Series from the IGFA in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Brought to you by Bass Pro Shops and Mako Boats. Let's get right back to George.
Welcome back to the Saltwater Sportsman National Seminar Series, the panel, king mackerel. Let's get right back to it. We were talking about bottom fishing, anchoring up for yellowtails, in our case, to try to get the bigger kings. Now, again, you talk about some of the advancements, another new service by Sirius XM called fish mapping. They have a couple of features that relate to this in terms of plankton fronts and also plankton contours. Plankton fronts being the zones where the plankton concentrations are the heaviest, which in turn would mean the bait fish would be around, which in turn would mean the predator fish should be around. If you could find those strong fronts within the depth zones of the kings, makes a big difference. Now, talk about the plankton contours, which helped you score a big kingfish recently, Dave.
I went in and pulled up the plankton contours where they were real tight. And so we decided to go to that spot. When we got there, within a matter of minutes, we had the first fish in. It wasn't a big fish, but we stayed in that area, and then we located 3 or 4 larger fish over 30.
Which is amazing. It's all about trying to get to the zones of the bait. Now, here's where things are going to differ a little bit here. Now, Dave, again, you're representative of the super small hooks, the wire, to try to get the king mackerel bites. What is one of your typical live bait king mackerel rigs that you use when you're in competitions?
Well, we have 2 different types that we sort of use. We have one that we call a double pogey rig. As you can see, we have 2 different nose hooks on it. They're 1/0 hooks. We have 2 number 4 4/0 treble hooks as stingers. This seems to produce a bigger fish, especially on top. We have a lot of luck with the larger fish on that.
Now, what pound test wire again?
This is 44-pound.
Super light, and
Very
you're
small.
using treble hooks that really you could catch bluegills on.
Yep, exactly. But we usually run a leader of about 36 to 48 inches. And then on the deeper runs, the downriggers, we use something like this with a little skirt over the nose.
Yep.
This is two number 4 strong treble hooks.
Right.
One we use for the nose and the other for the stinger. We use the same, about a 36, 48 inch leader on it. And then the duster that we use over the nose, it varies what color, depends on, what type of water you're in. If you're in dirty water, you want something, a little darker.
All right. Now, go ahead, Bouncer.
Is that titanium wire you're using?
No, this is not. This is just regular 7-strand. And we always use coffee color up our
So
way.
it's a braided, or a twisted wire?
Yes.
Gotcha.
All right. By comparison, and the downfall of that is when you hook a big king, the tiny hooks, you have to finesse that fish. Let that fish run and exhaust itself. Otherwise, you put any extra heavy pressure, the hooks could rip.
Yep.
Or they may
hooks will
straighten
pull
out.
The teeth could cut through the line, but we don't horse them. We just let them run, wear them down, take it easy, and just get them to the boat, nice and slow.
One rig that I always favor, and people don't really equate that to king mackerel fishing, is you bumping up to a 60 some odd pound single strand wire leader, and it's a double circle hook rig, VMC circle hook, size 4/0, maybe 5/0. You have your lead hook, then attached to the lead hook with a little swivel, and the other piece of wire would be the rear. You catch yourself a legal size yellowtail or a Spanish mackerel in that case.
Or a blue runner.
Or a blue runner.
Even better.
Yep.
Or a baby bonita.
Baby bonita. We could go on and on and on.
The bottom line is, very important, when you're talking about this, if you're talking about live bait,
and the sad thing, he's not even been in a Papa's Pilar yet, so that's a whole other thing. But the advantage of that is you put a yellowtail or your live bait out, put the rod in the holder. When a big fish crashes it, you're fighting them on 20-pound test line. You're going to have hooks that aren't going to pull their circles. They're not going to straighten out. You could apply as much pressure as you would in a typical fight. You're going to get this king in a lot faster, and in our case too, hopefully ahead of the sharks. And we still get the big kings blow up on it. And the beauty of it, leaving the rod holder, if they hit it and nothing happens, they miss it, and there's only half left, either free spool it, let that chunk come down, that king's going to come up and come back, and you get at least 2 shots at it.
Most of the time, if they miss it the first time, don't pull it in, leave it there, because they will normally come back and pick it up.
There's no doubt about it. Mark.
There's a toothy critter that one of many toothy critters that always want to go for the tail. They're trying to cut the motor off, so they'll circle back around. So one of the rigs that we use for big kings, now for us down in the lower Keys in Key West, you've got pilchards, you've got blue runners, the legal yellowtail you're talking about. So you have to vary your setup to the size of the bait.
Right.
If it's only small pilchards you're fishing, you don't want a huge hook, or you don't want a stinger rig. You want to get just something, maybe a 3/0, 4/0 circle hook, fine. But if you're fishing these, if you get these gigantic, ginormous blue runners, then we're using a circle hook.
What size?
We're using 5/0, 6/0, 7/0, and then if you can make your stinger rig with another circle hook like you're talking about, or you can go with a 3-strong treble. And you want to hook that 3-strong treble. Some guys use a rubber band. Some guys just stick it in the skin back there in that back third of the bait. So when that fish comes by and cuts that motor off, he's got a chance of getting hooked.
And hold that thought. We're going to go to commercial break, and we're going to pick it up right after we sell some equipment for our sponsors. Saltwater Sportsman National Seminar Series being filmed at the International Game Fish Association.
The Saltwater Sportsman National Seminar Series is brought to you by Rapala, your best shot at a world record. Suffix, always use the best line. VMC, your expert in hooks. Williamson Lures, for the pelagic playground. Starbright, blending technology with performance since 1973. George will be right back. Welcome back to the 34th Annual Saltwater Sportsman National Seminar Series from the IGFA in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Brought to you by Bass Pro Shops and Mako Boats. Let's get right back to George.
Welcome back to the Saltwater Sportsman National Seminar Series presented by Bass Pro Shops and Mako Boats. The discussion is king mackerel. And I want to talk about one other item before we continue on with some of the other offbeat tactics. We talked about the double circle hook rig. Also, if you don't have live bait, don't fret. king mackerel, they're predator fish. There's been a number of times where we would set out and we would just drift. We would take a dead goggle eye, a dead Spanish mackerel, a dead ballou, hook it up to a circle hook, cast it out, free spooled out a ways, and put that rod in the holder and forget about it. Go back to bottom fishing or whatever you were doing, and just that bait floating around or the half of the bait will draw big kings to eat. Now, Bouncer, you're pulling out a swimming plug. Now we're getting away from the live bait, dead bait. You're focusing a little bit more on the trolling aspect of it.
Interesting story. Some guys from Tennessee drove to the Carolina coast, and they said, we've never fished for these king mackerel, but we're going to fish this big tournament. And they asked the tackle shop, what's the best way we can do this with no experience? You got a live well? No. He sold the guys a couple of swimming plugs like this, different size lips to dive different depths. They went out from Tennessee, never caught a king mackerel, and won the tournament. Now, I'll grant you, this might be before you were born, George, but I was around back in those days, and those guys were really upset that those guys from Tennessee won the tournament with a swimming plug. But I've caught some really great kings.
Well, school kings, you could troll those, and the school kings will turn them up, those Rapala CD18s or now the 30s and the 40s. But I do have a question for you when it comes to leaders. What pound test? Are you going to go with single strand? Are you going to go with mono? Are you going to go with cable?
I use fluorocarbon leader with these, usually 60-pound test, because when a kingfish strikes, he almost always bites off the tail. And in the plug, he's going to do the same program. So I got all this hardware sticking out of his mouth. You get a lot more bites.
It's deadly on the school kings and occasionally get a big one. All right, you're doing traditional white, hold that up, bucktail
Okay,
jig.
so we have our traditional white bucktail jig, all right?
Mm-hmm.
But now a lot of times we'll put a chartreuse head. This happens to be an Upperman style. You can use arrowhead jigs, you can do, any type. But basically when we get into the school kingfish, just a lead-headed jig, pretty much any head style, an ounce, ounce and a half, that's gonna, they're commercial fishing those kingfish with these type of jigs and making a living doing it.
And you get geared more for the school kings.
They're more for the school kings.
The Saltwater Sportsman National Seminar Series is brought to you by Columbia Sportswear. Stay cool and protected while fishing. Calcutta Outdoors. Hard-working outdoor gear. JL Audio, ahead of the curve. ACR, building survival products since 1956. Florida Keys and Key West. Visit FLAkeys.com. George will be right back. Welcome back to the final installment of the 34th Annual Saltwater Sportsman National Seminar Series, brought to you by Bass Pro Shops and Mako Boats. Let's get right back to George.
And now, Dave, not to be outdone, I see you with something for show and tell. What are you showing us?
Whenever we can't find menhaden, we have to resort to dead bait. And it's either going to be ballyhoo or cigar minnows. And this is just a weighted head. It's a diving plug. And we'll hook the nose on the nose hook, which is just behind the head. And then we'll take the treble, the stinger, and stick it in the tail.
And what pound test wire? You're still back with that light wire?
I'm still using 44-pound
and
test.
a small treble.
Small
So
treble.
your typical tournament king mackerel rig, basically, you're adhering to.
Yeah. But we only resort to this when we don't have live bait.
Gotcha. No, it's something when we talked about, you were trying to find bait schools, we're looking at wrecks to try to find where the tails are, or Spanish mackerel schools coming down the beach. What about side scanning sonar, Dave? You fished all over. What's your take?
Well, the biggest thing is, there again, looking for the bait, looking for the menhaden. It's, we're out there before daylight, and menhaden flip on top. You can't find them before daylight. So we use the side scan to we just cruise the coast, we see a bait ball, we'll stop, we'll turn around, we'll throw on them, and we're out and gone. And it really pays off. Before we ever got the side scan from Simrad, it's just amazing the difference that it makes and how easy it is to find those schools.
Exactly. Bouncer.
Just to give you an example, what the side scan means relative to a guy that hasn't experienced it yet, you had a fish finder, you were looking underneath the boat. And the shallower the water, the less area under the boat you were looking at. Now with side scan, you're looking 100, 200 feet over this way, 100, 200 feet over that way, and you're looking straight down. And the imaging is so detailed that a lot of times you can tell what size the bait is. You can see their fins and everything else. It's unbelievable. What an improvement in ways to find bait and predators.
Very cool. Mark, I'm going to give you the last shot here, your 3 most important tips to catching big king mackerel. And again, we talked the light tackle, light leaders versus the circle hooks. Give me Mark Schmidt's top 3 tricks to catch trophy class king mackerel.
I'm going to say, first of all, do a little homework. Try to get a little history about are you going to go to the Gulf side? I mean, there's so many places to fish down in the lower Keys and Key West. Gulf side, Atlantic side, find yellowtail schools and big baits. And I preferably, even over a yellowtail, prefer a big blue runner. I mean, a big blue runner.
Very good.
And that would be it for me.
Sounds good. And I appreciate that. Dave Wicker, Bouncer Smith, Mark Schmidt. That was our king mackerel session of the Saltwater Sportsman National Seminar Series. And we'll be back with yet another highly informative session. Well, there you have it, this week's Saltwater Sportsman National Seminar Series. Now, adhering to Saltwater Sportsman Seminar Series tradition, you still have chances to win door prize drawings. Simply go to nationalseminarseries.com, log on to the door prize page, just give us your name, phone number, and an email address, and at the conclusion of the airing of the series in December, we will draw for a number of excellent door prizes. Get right to it. We'll see you on the next episode of the Saltwater Sportsman National Seminar Series.